Liam Vance moved through the crowd at the Vance Strategic 30th Anniversary Gala with the practiced ease of royalty navigating a familiar yet suffocating court. The smooth, polished rhythm of the event was second nature to him. A monotonous ballet performed under the crystalline glow of imported, priceless chandeliers, each facet reflecting the sterile, blinding wealth of the corporation. Every smile he offered, every handshake he initiated, every subtle nod of acknowledgement exchanged with the older, wealthier, and generally more ruthless attendees, felt less like human interaction and more like a necessary tax, a transaction that subtly chipped away at the fragile edges of his own soul, leaving him trapped, perpetually, in the gilded cage of his burdensome legacy. He was the perfect, well-bred product of the Vance system, his tuxedo perfectly tailored to disguise the tension in his shoulders, his knowledge of global market volatility impeccable, yet beneath that flawless veneer, a deep, corrosive dissatisfaction festered, eating away at his genuine self. He felt perpetually underwater, observing the scene through a thick, distorting lens, acutely aware that every piece of commissioned modern art, every ounce of gold detailing, and the very foundation of the Vance headquarters was purchased and maintained with the same ruthless, unseen aggression and moral compromises that had characterized his father's entire professional life. He was not a son. He was an investment, a symbol, a future assurance of continuity for the predators circling the champagne flute tables. His designated role was deceptively simple: be the handsome, stable future, project an aura of unshakable dominance. But Liam knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the continuity his father demanded was merely the continuation of moral rot, and he was growing utterly tired of being the most expensive and ornamental fixture in the room, suffocated by the expectation that he would inherit the role of chief executioner. The air in the grand high-ceiling ballroom was heavy, thick with the scent of old money, rare imported cigars, expensive champagne, and the barely concealed hunger of the power brokers who congregated there. This was not merely an anniversary party. It was an auction of influence, a silent, deadly game of leverage, debt collection, and subtle territorial marking, all played out beneath soaring ceilings designed to emphasize the guest's smallness in comparison to the institution's colossal, global vastness. The atmosphere itself felt physically oppressive, not with humidity, but with the accumulated, unspoken transgressions of decades of global manipulation and strategic destruction. The powerful men and women gathered spoke in measured, modulated tones, their voices carefully controlled to hide the avarice and desperation lurking beneath every congratulatory toast and every strategic whisper. Liam could practically hear the financial calculations ticking behind the veneer of casual conversation, the silent, binding agreements that would, in the coming weeks, decide the fate of distant economies, resource allocation, and the livelihoods of thousands of unseen lives. He was disgusted by the easy, backslapping camaraderie, recognizing it instantly for the fragile, temporary truce it was, a collective agreement among sophisticated wolves to share the current kill before inevitably turning on each other in the next fiscal quarter. The sharp scent of the high-end liquor only served to sharpen his senses, making him acutely, sickeningly aware of the fabricated nature of this entire world, a realization that drove him further and further into his internal isolation, a quiet, desperate rebellion of the spirit. For 28 years, this life, a life defined by polished granite corridors, hushed conversations about market control, and the cold, relentlessly judging gaze of his father, Marcus Vance, had been Liam's inescapable gilded cage. The bars were invisible, forged from expectation, duty, and the crushing, monolithic weight of the Vance name, a name that commanded instant fear in half the world and mandated automatic deference in the other. His entire childhood had been a syllabus of strategic training, his education curated not to foster curiosity or independent thought, but to produce a singular, unfeeling successor. Marcus Vance, a man carved from sheer ice and uncompromising ambition, had always been a distant, critical presence, never apparent, his gaze constantly assessing, perpetually finding his son lacking the requisite hardness, the willingness to be truly cruel. Liam understood, with a painful clarity that had dawned in his adolescence, that his father did not love him. He valued him, like a high-yield asset to be maintained and deployed at the most strategic moment. Every birthday, every academic milestone, had been underscored by a terse reminder of the scale of the monstrous legacy he was expected to carry. The cage was not merely the physical estate with its surrounding iron fences. It was the intense psychological confinement, the absolute, soul-crushing knowledge that his freedom to choose, to love, or even to feel deeply, had been sacrificed on the altar of corporate perpetuity long before he was born. His every action, from his choice of tie to his current mingling, was meticulously choreographed by the ghost of Marcus's ambition. He was the reluctant heir, handsome and outwardly charming, performing his required dance of handshakes and hollow smiles, all the while feeling the heavy, suffocating weight of a destiny he desperately wished to shed. His charm, ironically, was less a social skill and more a defensive mechanism, a well-honed shield to deflect deeper, unwanted inquiry, developed over years of avoiding genuine connection with the transactional sharks who populated his social sphere. He moved with a practiced grace that suggested unshakable confidence, but inside, every step was a deliberate, weary effort against the powerful current of his true desires. He was a master of the vacant smile, the perfectly ambiguous compliment, the non-committal strategic reply that meant absolutely nothing. This performance, however, was becoming increasingly costly to his mental state. The strain was beginning to show in the minute, barely perceptible tension around his jawline and the profound hollowness behind his impeccably blue eyes. He longed, desperately, for dissonance, for something raw, organic and unpredictable to enter his life, a force potent enough to disrupt the established order and offer him an excuse, a moral imperative, to finally drop the mask and abandon the script his father had so cruelly written for him. His deepest, most terrifying fear was not failing Marcus Vance, which would lead to ostracization, but succeeding him, the ultimate horror of realizing he had become the man he hated most in the world. His eyes, though attentive to the conversation and appearing engaged, often drifted pointedly to the margins, searching for an edge, a flaw, or any evidence of a moment of genuine, unmanaged humanity that this sterile environment systematically stripped away. The very center of the room, where the wealth congregated and the deals were brokered, was a vacuum of authenticity, a dead zone of real feeling. Liam sought the periphery, the service corners where staff hurried, the subtle imperfections in the hand-polished marble, the deliberately concealed monitoring cameras his own company had installed, anything that betrayed the illusion of perfection and control. He was actively looking for evidence that the world was larger than his father's domain, that genuine, unfiltered life existed outside the perimeter of Vance's strategic influence. He watched the waiters and the low-level security guards with a curiosity he never extended to the guests, seeing in their visible exhaustion and quiet professionalism a kind of honest labor and authentic struggle that was utterly absent in the predatory exchanges around him. This peripheral observation was his quiet, nonverbal act of rebellion, a constant, internal affirmation that he was not of this world, merely passing through it, waiting for the signal to escape. It was in one of these focused searches for a fault line that his attention was finally caught, drawn not by distraction or noise, but by an unexpected, singular focus. It was in one of those peripheral glances that he first saw her. She was an arresting break in the monochrome tapestry of the evening, a sudden, sharp splash of color in a world meticulously calibrated for muted power and submission. His gaze locked onto her with an immediate, undeniable intensity that cut through the background hum of the gala like a siren. He didn't know her name or her background, but her sheer presence was a stark, compelling contrast to the artificiality surrounding him. The effect she had was instantly destabilizing, a sudden shift in the emotional gravity of the room that made his focus tunnel entirely onto her, excluding all the surrounding, meaningless noise. It wasn't just physical attraction, though that was undeniable. It was the force field of palpable purpose she carried, a weight of intent that was utterly alien to the superficiality of the Vance world. She was the one crack he had been searching for, the unexpected variable, the raw, beautiful force that threatened to derail his programmed future entirely, and the sudden, exhilarating rush of pure adrenaline told him this moment was either the beginning of his true freedom or the catastrophic end of his life as he knew it. Elara Soto was not among the guests, the privileged or the powerful. She was distinctly on the staff roster, blending seamlessly into the background in the required black uniform of a temporary caterer. She wore the uniform not as a mark of subservience, but rather as a kind of temporary camouflage, an invisibility cloak carefully designed to place her precisely where the powerful were most likely to overlook or ignore her entirely. Her movements were efficient, practiced, but crucially lacked the vacant, compliance of the true service staff. There was a visible tautness in her shoulders, a deeply coiled energy that belied the temporary role she was playing. She moved with an acute awareness that suggested she was an observer, not a participant, her focus razor-sharp and directed outward, seeking information rather than fulfilling orders. The uniform was merely her tactical strategy, allowing her access to the hidden corners of the establishment, granting her the temporary, anonymous freedom to see and record without being seen. Liam, trained from birth to recognize threats and anomalies in any setting, immediately understood that this woman was not just working for tips. she was working for something far more valuable, more personal, and infinitely more dangerous. Yet her presence was an overwhelming magnetic field against the dull backdrop of corporate conformity. In a room full of carefully calculated appearances, controlled emotions, and rehearsed dialogue, Elara radiated an unvarnished, dangerous authenticity that drew Liam like a compass needle to true north. The guests were all pale copies of each other, their gestures and dialogue the predictable product of generations of elite conditioning and moral erosion. Elara was unique, an organic, defiant element in a rigidly mechanistic environment. This intense magnetism was the alluring, dangerous appeal of the unknown, the lure of an honest, necessary conflict to a man starving for true battle after years of playing diplomatic games. Her very existence in this carefully controlled space was a silent, beautiful, devastating challenge to his father's absolute authority, and Liam felt an involuntary, powerful urge to ally himself with her, to protect that challenge, and to explore the profound promise of genuine human connection it represented. She was positioned near the ornate service entrance, ostensibly adjusting a massive floral arrangement, but the intensity in her eyes was far too sharp, too penetrating, for someone merely focused on canapes or petal arrangements. Her hands moved over the petals with routine, professional grace, but her gaze was fixed, calculating, assessing the architectural geometry and, more importantly, the strategic placement of the hidden security features. The floral arrangement itself, a massive, obscuring centerpiece of white lilies and deep green foliage, was merely a pretext, a perfect, leafy shield for her true activity. Liam could see the micro-expressions that betrayed her true, desperate intent. The slight, momentary tightening of the brow, the fleeting moment of professional decision in her eyes. It was the unmistakable look of a hunter sighting her prey, not a server tidying a display. The sheer, uncompromising focus in her eyes was a language Liam instantly understood and profoundly resonated with. It spoke of a deep, personal commitment, a drive that went far beyond professional ambition and hinted at a long-simmering injustice she was determined to finally right, no matter the cost. A slight, almost imperceptible flick of her wrist drew his attention, confirming his gravest suspicion. The movement was quick, subtle, cleverly concealed within the larger, innocuous gesture of adjusting a thick, obscuring leaf. It was the precise, minute movement of a professional, someone accustomed to working in the highest-risk plain sight while remaining functionally invisible to the guards. Liam, who had received years of close-quarters security training in spotting such anomalies, instantly recognized the specific, minimal motor control required for such a maneuver. It was the practiced, almost involuntary reflex of an experienced surveillance operator or, more likely, a journalist/photographer working deep undercover without permission. His heart gave a dangerous, excited thump in his chest, a jolt of raw energy he hadn't experienced since he was a rebellious, untested teenager. He watched the leaf drop back into place, leaving no visual evidence of the action, but the intellectual realization was stark. This woman was actively gathering intelligence on his father, and she was dangerously, frighteningly good at it. This confirmed his earlier suspicion, elevating her instantly from a fleeting curiosity to a significant, shared, and possibly allied adversary against the monolithic Vance machine. It wasn't a serving gesture, it was the discreet snap of a camera lens concealed deep within the floral arrangement, aimed directly at the private, sealed-off entrance to Marcus Vance's executive suite. Liam recognized the faint, high-frequency sound, the mechanical shook-click of a professional shutter designed for absolute silence, barely audible over the background wash of the string orchestra. The camera itself was clearly a marvel of miniaturization, likely embedded deep in the dense foliage, perfectly aligned to capture the high-value, discrete targets entering and leaving the restricted area. This was not a general sweep for gossip. This was targeted espionage. The target was the very nexus of Marcus Vance's operation, and the risk she was undertaking was unimaginable. The realization sent a sharp chill down Liam's spine, yet it was not fear for himself, but a profound, almost spiritual sense of validation. Someone else saw the rot, someone else was fighting back with precision and courage. The specific laser focus on the executive suite, the nexus of all Vance Strategic's most confidential and likely compromising activity, told Liam that she was pursuing a genuine, systemic truth, not just a tabloid scoop. Liam recognized the look in her eyes, focus, purpose, and a fierce, burning need for justice. He saw the integrity he felt was dying inside himself. He felt a sudden, dangerous curiosity, a pull that defied all the years of Vance discipline. He excused himself from his conversation and, under the pretense of seeking air, slipped into the dimly lit corridor where Elara was working. The moment he approached, her entire posture shifted, becoming wary and defensive, like a cornered animal. She met his gaze, and the tension between them was immediate and palpable, a sudden, electric short-circuit in the cold machinery of the gala. Liam didn't reach for his security earpiece. He chose a different path. He didn't ask what she was doing. He simply observed the subtle tremor in her hand, confirming her vulnerability. He noted the camera, the angle, and the faint scar of determination near her jaw. He leaned in, his voice a low, intimate murmur, entirely out of place in the sterile hallway. He asked about the lighting, feigning a concern for the aesthetics of the party, while his real question hung unspoken. "Who are you and what are you really hunting?" She responded with a sharp, guarded wit that hinted at depths far beyond the uniform she wore. In those stolen, highly charged minutes, their dialogue revealed opposing worldviews, his of cynical entrapment, hers of fierce, hopeful independence, yet bound by an unnerving, undeniable attraction. Liam felt an exhilarating jolt of freedom, the first honest breath he'd taken all night. He let her go, intrigued, but warned her silently with his eyes about the profound danger she courted. The meeting blossomed into a clandestine series of professional-sounding rendezvous that quickly shed their pretense. They met in parks and corner cafes, anywhere far from the sweeping, vigilant censors of Vance Strategic. Liam found himself confessing his quiet despair over his father's methods, the ruthless, shadow-based operations that built their wealth. Elara, in turn, began to peel back her own layers of guarded fury, admitting she was an investigative photojournalist and Marcus Vance was her target. The true, devastating confession came weeks later. Elara revealed the name of her father, a former, incorruptible corporate whistleblower, whom Marcus had systematically and financially obliterated a decade earlier. This act had ruined his reputation and his life, forcing Elara to grow up fighting for every scrap of professional credibility. The discovery was a seismic shock. Liam was the son of the destroyer, Elara was the daughter of the destroyed. She looked at him with anguish, justice versus a terrifying, consuming genuine love. Liam's face crumpled, not in denial but in shame. He confirmed the corporate malice, feeling the full, nauseating weight of the family rot. Yet, instead of pushing him away, Elara saw the same genuine pain in him. This conflict fused them together in a reckless, desperate alliance against the poison that defined his name. But Marcus Vance was an architect of control. His security apparatus intercepted the escalating communication. He quickly identified Elara as an existential threat to his empire. Marcus launched his first devastatingly quiet strike. Without ever contacting Elara directly, he used his vast corporate network to erase her foundation. Elara's apartment lease was abruptly terminated, and her freelance accounts suddenly dried up. It was a surgical, financial character assassination. The devastation was quiet but complete. Liam found Elara in her small apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes. She finally articulated the impossible truth. "I love you, but you are the son of the man who took everything from me." Liam's response was immediate, visceral, and a renunciation of his entire existence. "Then let me give it all up. Let me choose you over the rot." It was their turning point, their vow of defiance. The ultimate confrontation came days later. Marcus called an emergency meeting of the Vance Strategic Board and publicly announced Liam's immediate engagement to a rival CEO's daughter. When Marcus made the announcement, Liam stood silent for a long, agonizing moment. Then, with a clarity that shocked everyone, he refused. He publicly renounced his inheritance, his position, and the very name. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Marcus, cold and furious, his control lost, did not scream or rage. He simply delivered the prophecy, "You have chosen destruction. You will get it." Liam walked out of the opulent office, a free man in spirit, but a target in reality. He threw his expensive Vance security keycard into the dirt, cementing his choice. The fall was swift. Liam and Elara were suddenly living in a small, cheap rental, their life constantly underlined by stress and financial desperation. Liam worked manual labor. Elara redoubled her investigative efforts. Marcus used his pervasive influence to turn Liam's life into a siege. False allegations led to Liam losing his labor job, and legitimate inherited accounts were mysteriously frozen. Marcus was focused entirely on breaking them. It was Elara who fired the first real shot, publishing a devastating investigative piece using Liam's extracted documents, exposing Vance Strategic's illegal offshore surveillance. The consequence was immediate. The Vance stock plummeted, and the company faced international inquiries. Marcus decided on a decisive, ultimate counterstrike. a cover-up so complete it would ruin Elara's reputation forever. He instructed his chief of security Rex to quietly discredit the leak by planting evidence suggesting Elara fabricated it. Rex, in his zeal, targeted a remote Vance data center and initiated a controlled fire to destroy the evidence. But fate intervened. The fire spread uncontrollably. It consumed the targeted evidence and an adjoining critical infrastructure hub that Vance Strategic secretly controlled. This was the catastrophic moment where their forbidden love, through the chain reaction of Marcus's attempts to suppress it, destroyed everything outside their relationship. News exploded. The Vance name was instantly synonymous with terror and industrial sabotage. Marcus immediately framed Liam and Elara for the catastrophic event, painting them as vengeful whistleblowers driven by malice. They realized their defiance had cost them their freedom. Their escape was a desperate, scrambling ballet across the city. They stripped themselves of all technology, subsisting on cash and cheap motels, the knowledge that separating was unthinkable being their only constant. The love that had been their shield began to turn inward, becoming a source of unbearable tension. Through the chain reaction of Marcus's attempts to suppress it, destroyed everything outside their relationship. News exploded. The Vance name was instantly synonymous with terror and industrial sabotage. Marcus immediately framed Liam and Elara for the catastrophic event, painting them as vengeful whistleblowers driven by malice. They realized their defiance had cost them their freedom. Their escape was a desperate, scrambling ballet across the city. They stripped themselves of all technology, subsisting on cash and cheap motels, the knowledge that separating was unthinkable being their only constant. The love that had been their shield began to turn inward, becoming a source of unbearable tension. Liam made a desperate high-risk appeal to his mother, Victoria. Victoria, finally broken by Marcus's cruelty, slipped Liam the encrypted keys to Marcus's secret server, the proof of the sabotage orders, in a tense, final act of family treason. Liam and Elara connected with an incorruptible detective for the handover. Rex and the security team were captured, the data was transferred, Marcus was arrested, and the Vance empire collapsed. Liam faced a short jail term, the final, necessary cleansing cost of bearing the Vance name. Elara waited, their correspondence holding their bond intact across the distance. 3 years later, Liam was released, meeting Elara outside their modest new home. They stood there, two people who had lost everything else, but finally had a foundation forged by their enduring love.